Chapter 1. The Road Out. Something was following us through the trees. I knew that before I saw it. The dog knew it first. He was curled in the passenger footwell, shaking so hard that his collar tag clicked against the plastic trim every few seconds. I dragged him out of the campground less than half an hour earlier, cut him loose from the dock with infected closing in from every side. And now he sat there staring at the dark passenger window, like the forest had started whispering his name. Then he growled. It was low and ugly. I sat behind the wheel, one knee braced under it, and a cigarette paper balanced across my fingers with strands of loose tobacco spilling onto my lap. "Don't do that," I said to the dog. But he didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the passing tree line, his lips pulled back over his teeth. The RV rattled down the forest road, headlights bouncing over mud, pine trunks and low branches that scraped along the side like fingernails. The door behind me shook in its bent frame, still held shut by a ratchet strap, a warped sheet of plywood, and the kind of desperate optimism that was guaranteed to get me killed. I tried to finish rolling the cigarette anyway. Stupid, I know. But after the night I'd had, the ritual of it was keeping me calm. Pinch the tobacco, roll the paper, lick the edge. Pretend for 10 seconds that the world wasn't falling apart around me. The dog growled again, and this time I checked the mirror. The driver's side mirror was gone, torn off when I forced the RV past the wreck at the campground entrance. The passenger mirror was still there, but vibrating so badly that I might as well have been underwater. For a second, I saw nothing, just black trees and the crooked gravel track fading away behind us. Then the moon slipped out from behind a cloud. Something pale moved between the trunks. There and gone. I gulped, and my fingers crushed the cigarette paper. The RV drifted toward the shoulder, tires spitting gravel into the ditch. I gripped the wheel and hauled us back onto the road before we ended up wrapped around a pine tree. The dog barked again, sharp and terrified this time. "Yeah," I whispered. "I saw it. The thing in the woods shouldn't have been able to keep up. Not with the RV moving. Not through trees and mud and darkness. But the road was curving, doubling back, and climbing the ridge in slow switchbacks. The woods didn't. And whatever was out there was cutting straight through." I stole a glance at the unlit cigarette now crushed in my hand, then at the dog, and then at the road ahead. "Naming things is how you end up caring," I told the dog. "So you and me, we're not doing that." He kept staring at the window. Behind us, somewhere deep in the trees, something shrieked. The sound followed us up the ridge and set every hair on my tired body standing on end. The road climbed for another mile after that, each bend tighter than the last. The engine didn't like it. I could hear that even over the rattle of the cabinets and the slap of loose plywood against the wall behind me. It had started making a thin, strained whine. The kind of noise that made a man think about repair bills in the old world and shallow graves in the new one. The temperature needle crept slowly upwards, not into the red yet, but close enough. "Come on," I whispered, leaning forward over the wheel as though that would somehow help. "Don't do this now." The dog gave a short, nervous huff. "I wasn't talking to you," I grimaced. At the top of the ridge, the trees thinned, and Lake County opened up beneath us. I hit the brakes harder than I meant to. The RV rocked on its suspension and something heavy rolled out from under the table behind me. The dog slid forward, caught himself against the dashboard, then gave me a look like I'd done it on purpose. I barely noticed. I was too distracted. Below us, the town was burning. Orange light pulsed between buildings and smoke crawled along the rooftops and drifted over the highway in long, dirty ribbons. The main road into town was a solid chain of headlights and brake lights, stretching from the bridge all the way back toward the interstate. cars sat bumper to bumper. Some had their doors hanging open. Others were sideways across the lanes, smashed nose first into barriers, ditches, or each other. Near the bridge, a semi had jackknifed and blocked both sides of the road. Between the vehicles, figures moved. Some were running, some were not. Even from the ridge, I could hear pieces of it through the cracked windshield. Horns, sirens, the flat crack of gunfire. A scream that rose into the night and then stopped so suddenly it left me colder than if it had gone on. The emergency radio, half buried somewhere behind me under a spill of tools and cans, crackled back to life. Residents and travelers are advised to shelter in place. Lock all doors. Barricade ground-level access points. Do not attempt to travel unless instructed by emergency personnel. I stared at the highway. Helpful, I muttered. The dog put his front paws on the passenger seat and looked down at the valley with me, his ears flicking at every distant gunshot. The main road was finished. Town was worse. If I took the RV down there, we'd end up boxed in between abandoned cars with the infected coming at us from both sides and no room to turn around. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere with tools, somewhere I could stop long enough to work out what the hell was leaking before the engine cooked itself. I grabbed the old road atlas from the gap beside the driver's seat. The cover was torn, the pages were stained with coffee and old ash, and half the gas stations marked inside had probably been turned into vape shops years ago. But it didn't need a signal, which made it more useful than the cracked phone lying dead somewhere on the floor behind me. I flipped to the Lake County page and held it beneath the weak dome light. The campground sat by the lake. The highway was a thick red line through town. The town itself was exactly where every instinct told me not to go. North of the ridge, though, a thin gray service road curled through the forest and ended at a small square labeled Pine Hollow Ranger Station. I tapped it with one dirty finger. Ranger Station, I muttered. Tools, maybe coolant, maybe fuel, maybe a radio. The dog looked at me and tilted his head. Maybe nobody dead inside, I added. He kept staring. Yeah, I know, I nodded. That's a lot of maybes. Behind us, down among the black trees, something shrieked again. Closer this time. I folded the atlas and shoved it between the seats. Pine Hollow it is, I said, knocking the van back into gear. I started rolling forward before I had time to think better of it. Chapter 2. Pine Hollow. I nearly missed the turnoff. The sign was a dark green plank half swallowed by moss, hanging crooked between two posts. If the headlights hadn't caught the edge of the white lettering, I'd have driven right by and probably cooked the engine somewhere deeper in the woods. I turned hard, and the RV lurched off the gravel and onto a narrow track that looked like it had been carved out by rainwater and regret. Mud slapped against the underside of the chassis and branches dragged along both sides. The dog dropped back into the footwell and braced himself like he'd finally accepted that my driving wasn't going to improve. Don't judge me, I sighed, spying his side eye. I didn't plan for any of this. The track climbed between the pines for maybe half a mile before the ranger station appeared through the trees. It was a low wooden building with a porch and one equipment shed. A thin radio mast stood adjacent, stabbing up into the dark. There was a flagpole with no flag and a parking area of mud, gravel, and wet pine needles. A ranger truck sat near the porch at a crooked angle, both front doors open. No lights, no movement, no warm welcome from a man in uniform telling me I'd done the right thing by coming there. I parked facing back toward the track. Nose out, always nose out. That was one of the few habits I'd picked up that had never got me punched, arrested, or divorced. The engine rattled for a few seconds after I killed it, then settled into silence. Only the ticking of heat coming off the hood was audible. Then another sound underneath, a slow drip into the mud. I closed my eyes and prayed, "Please don't be oil." The dog whined and I nodded at him softly. He lifted his head and stared through the windshield. At first, I thought he was looking at the Ranger truck. Then I saw the body. It was slumped across the passenger seat, face turned down, one arm dangling through the open door. Ranger uniform, dark blood on the sleeve. There was a radio clipped to one shoulder and he was very much dead. Probably. The problem with the word dead was that it had stopped meaning what it used to. I took the revolver from the cup holder and checked the cylinder. 5 rounds loaded, 6 still loose in the box. 11 chances to make a mistake. "Stay," I told the dog. He immediately climbed onto the passenger seat, staring at me. "I mean it," I said. He looked at me with the fixed, stubborn expression of an animal that had decided I wasn't in charge of either of us. I opened the driver's door and slid down into the mud. The air outside was colder up here. Damp pine, wet earth, hot engine. And underneath it all, still clinging to my shirt and hands, that coppery, rotten stink from the campground. I crouched by the front wheel and shone my flashlight beneath the RV. The leak came from low and forward, steady enough to cause concern. It wasn't fuel or oil, unless I was lying to myself badly. Coolant, probably. I'd lived in the RV long enough to tell the difference between a problem you could nurse for a while and a problem that could leave you stranded. This was the second kind. Then, the dog barked from inside. Just once. Sharp. Warning. I stood too quickly and nearly cracked my head on the side mirror. The dog was staring past me now, toward the equipment shed. The shed door stood open about 6 inches, creaking slightly in the wind. I hated that sound immediately. I wished I could get back in the van and drive until the engine died. But the truth was, there was nowhere left to drive to. So I tucked the revolver into my waistband, took the flashlight in one hand, and sucked in a deep breath. Then I went to see what Pine Hollow had left for me. The equipment hut smelled like old gasoline, mouse droppings, damp wood, and dust. My flashlight beams swept across shelves packed with exactly the sort of junk a man learned to love when civilization was busy eating itself. Hose clamps, rusty tools, zip ties, duct tape, motor oil, even a dead chainsaw and a tarp folded badly enough to prove a person had done it. Then I spied 2 plastic jugs of coolant sat on the bottom shelf. For the first time since the alert, something in my chest loosened. For a fleeting second, it felt like the world was on my side. I squatted down and grabbed one of the coolant jugs before shoving it into an old canvas tool bag hanging from a nail. Then I noticed a red metal cabinet fixed to the back wall, complete with a sign which read, "Emergency use only." I stared at it and almost laughed. "Finally," I muttered, "somebody thinking ahead." It was locked, of course it was, but I ripped a small screwdriver from the shelf and wedged it into the gap on the case door, pulling until the metal shrieked. The door bent, resisted, then popped open hard enough to bounce against the wall. Inside were 3 road flares, a hand crank radio, a first aid kit, 2 bottles of water, and a dusty box of 12-gauge shells. No shotgun, though, because apparently the apocalypse still had a sense of humor. I took the flares and the radio, then threw the shells into the canvas bag for good measure. The dog barked again, but not from inside the RV, but from outside. My stomach dropped. I turned and ran to the shed door. The dog was out. Somehow the idiot had squeezed through the passenger window or forced the door open. He stood between the RV and the Ranger truck with all 4 paws planted wide, teeth bared at the tree line. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed. He didn't look at me. He stood, growling, eyes pinned. Then I saw it. A flash of red between the pines. The figure stepped into the moonlight slowly, like every joint had to be reminded what it was for. Red, windbreaker, one dragging foot, hiking pack hanging loose from one shoulder, my hatchet still buried deep between his neck and shoulder, the handle bouncing against his chest every time he moved. It was David, or the thing that had been David, his ruined head tilted when he saw me. One milky eye pointed somewhere over my shoulder. The other rolled loose in its socket until it seemed to find the dog. His mouth opened. "Hello." The word came out soft and warped, a stolen thing. Like his dead mouth had remembered the shape of it but not the meaning. The dog barked again, fierce and terrified. Then behind David, more shapes shifted between the trees. 4, maybe 5. Not a horde, but enough. I reached slowly into the tool bag and wrapped my fingers around one of the road flares. "Hello," David said again. His enunciation slightly improved this time. "No," I grimaced. "We are not doing this." I cracked the cap and struck the flare. Red light exploded between us. The trees turned black, the mud turned bloody, and every infected head snapped toward the hiss and the glow. David stopped instantly, so did the others. For one beautiful second, the whole world seemed to freeze. Then I threw the flare toward the ranger truck. It hit the mud, bounced once, and then rolled beneath the passenger door, bathing the dead ranger and the inside of the truck in pulsing red light. The infected turned toward it, not all the way and not for long, but long enough for me to launch myself at the dog, grab his collar, and haul him backward. He resisted for half a second, but I dragged him anyway. Back at the RV, I shoved him through the open driver's door and tossed the tool bag in after him. He scrambled across the seat, knocked the atlas onto the floor, and immediately tried to turn back around. "Stay inside, or I swear to God I'll leave you with David," I hissed. I slammed the door shut and ran to the hood. Chapter 3. Held Together. Fixing things under pressure sounds simple if you've never done it. Find the problem, find the part, make the repair, and move on. In real life, you drop screws in the mud, burn your fingers, swear at rubber hoses, and spend most of the job wondering whether the noises behind you are wind or your impending death. The split was in the coolant hose just behind the clamp. Old rubber. Bad timing. Story of my life. I cut away the damaged section with my pocket knife, shoved what was left of the hose back over the fitting, and tightened a fresh clamp until my wrist cramped. Then I added a second clamp beside it, because faith was for people with options. The coolant went in next, but there wasn't enough. I topped it off with one of the bottled waters from the emergency cabinet, and hoped the engine wasn't precious about the difference. Behind me, the flare hissed under the ranger truck. David and the others crowded toward it, reaching down, pawing at the red light like children around a campfire. One of them touched it. Their fingers curled and smoked, but the thing didn't scream. It didn't flinch. Didn't do anything that pain was supposed to make a body do. That was the worst part. Pain had rules. Whatever had taken over these people, it broke every rule in the book. I twisted the radiator cap back on and stepped away. Then the dog barked from the RV. I looked up. He was stood half out of the driver's window, front paws braced on the door, his eyes locked behind me. He barked again and I glanced over my shoulder. Then the flare died. The red glow collapsed into darkness. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then David turned his head. The hatchet handle swung against his chest. "Hello," he croaked. Then a chorus of the word echoed around the crowd of infected, reverberating off the trees. I grabbed the tool bag and ran. But David moved faster this time. Not fast exactly, but faster than something dead had any right to move. His broken foot dragged, but the rest of him lurched forward with sudden, awful purpose. The others followed from the trees, arms flailing, their jaws snapping at me. The dog went wild inside the RV, and I yanked open the driver's door and threw myself inside. David hit the door before I could pull it shut. His hand slapped against the frame, broken nails scraping paint. His emaciated face appeared in the gap, close enough for me to smell mud, rot, and the sour stink of whatever had filled him up and pushed him back onto his feet. He shrieked as he tried to force his arms through the gap, but I planted my boot against his chest and shoved. He stumbled back, just enough for me to slam the door shut. The latch popped as it caught, then David hit it again, and the whole panel bent inward with a metallic pop. The dog barked straight in my ear. "I know," I shouted, slamming the keys into the ignition. I twisted and the engine cranked, but it didn't catch. David hit the door again and the metal groaned. I twisted the keys again, harder, as if bullying the ignition barrel would fix anything. The engine coughed. "Come on," I begged. "Come on, girl." Another hit slammed into the door and it shifted inward. The engine coughed again, and then it caught. The RV roared awake, rough and smoky and beautiful. I threw it into reverse and stamped on the gas. The back end swung hard, clipping the shed with a crunch of splintering wood and metal. Tools flew. The dog fell sideways, scrambled up, and planted himself against the passenger seat, as if this whole mess had merely confirmed his low opinion of me. Then, David stumbled into the headlights. For half a second, I saw him clearly. The red jacket, the ruined face, my hatchet still lodged in him like a handle on a nightmare. I slammed it into drive. "Sorry, David." The RV struck him square on, and he disappeared under the hood, bones cracking as the tires crushed him into the dirt. The wheels bounced once, then again, and the hatchet tore loose somewhere underneath with a sound like somebody dropping a toolbox off a roof. It spun out behind us, flashed once in the lights, and disappeared into the mud. I didn't stop. The track blurred beneath us. Branches whipped the sides. The temperature needle began to climb back toward the red again, but then hovered there before dropping by a hair. The hose was holding. I let out a dry, sarcastic laugh. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I'd start screaming and never stop. The dog stood beside me now, panting hard, and I threw a glance sideways at him. "Scout," I said. He looked at me, head tilted again. The name had come out before I could stop it. "That's your name now, boy. Don't make a big thing out of it." Scout sneezed. Chapter 4. The Voice. We made it 3 miles before the hand-crank radio spoke. It sat on the dash where I'd thrown it, antenna bent, casing cracked, the little green light blinking tiredly. For a while, all it had given me was static. Then a voice pushed through. "Repeat. This is Pine Ridge Fire Lookout, broadcasting on Emergency Band 6. Survivors north of Lake County. Avoid the highway. Do not enter town. We have food, water, medical supplies, and armed personnel." I eased off the gas and Scout lifted his head. The voice came again, but weaker this time. "Pine Ridge Fire Lookout. Approach from the east road only. Do not approach after dark unless under immediate threat. Repeat. Do not approach after dark unless under immediate threat." The broadcast dissolved into static, and I stared at the radio for a moment and then looked up at the road ahead. "Well," I muttered, "I'd say being chased through the woods in a damaged RV counts as an immediate threat." Scout gave a soft huff from the passenger seat, still watching the black wall of trees behind us. I put the RV in gear and took the right-hand road. The climb up to Pine Ridge was the worst stretch yet. The track narrowed until it felt like I was threading the RV through a tunnel of tree trunks and darkness. Branches pinged off the aluminum and the engine whined every time the road steepened. Twice the rear wheels spun in the mud before catching again and Each time, my heart lodged itself a little higher in my throat. Scout didn't growl anymore, and that worried me more than when he had. He just sat there in the passenger seat, stiff and silent, ears pricked as if he'd already seen enough of the world to know when it was waiting to do something unpleasant. The emergency radio had gone dead. No more voice, no more helpful instructions. Just the hum of the engine, the shuddering rattle of loose cupboards, and the occasional tick of something hot beneath the hood, reminding me that my repair had been less of a repair and more of a wish directed at old machinery. Hold together, or we all die. The road bent sharply left around a strand of trees, climbed one last rise, and then suddenly flattened out. Pine Ridge appeared in the headlights all at once. A chain-link fence had been thrown up around the clearing at the top of the hill. It wasn't pretty, and definitely wasn't official. Sections of old fencing had been botched together with wooden posts, wire, and what looked like metal shelving ripped out of a warehouse. Floodlight poles stood at intervals around the perimeter, but none of them were on. Behind the fence loomed the dark shape of the fire lookout tower, rising above a squat cabin and a couple of parked vehicles I couldn't quite make out. No lights on in the windows, no movement on the tower platform. Still no voice on the radio. Nothing. I eased the RV to a stop in front of the closed gate, and Scout stood up on the passenger seat. I looked out through the windshield at the darkness for a second before I spoke. "Well," I whispered, "either we found the wrong place, or this isn't as welcoming as advertised." I hit the horn once quickly, a short, sharp honk. The sound blasted through the clearing and echoed off the trees. Scout nearly jumped out of his skin, and somewhere in the darkness behind the fence, a loose sheet of metal clattered in the wind. Then, silence again. I leaned over and hit the horn a second time. Still nothing. My stomach sank. Maybe the broadcast was old. Maybe Pine Ridge had already fallen. Maybe everyone inside was dead, and I'd just announced dinner. Suddenly, Scout started growling again, low and steady. I turned in my seat, and beyond the rear window, the darkness between the trees seemed to shift. A shape emerged from it. Then another. Then three more. My mouth went dry. They came shambling into the edge of the headlights one by one, drawn by the horn, the engine, or sheer miserable luck, mud-caked, slack-faced, moving with that awful broken persistence that I was beginning to hate more than speed. They spread across the clearing behind the RFU, not rushing but not stumbling blindly either. "Just coming," Scout barked. One of the infected broke from the others and veered toward my side door. I reached for the revolver. 5 rounds. It wasn't enough. Another shape lurched out of the tree line, and my heart sank even lower. Red windbreaker. It was David. He was still on us. The hatchet was gone now, but the wound it had left gaped dark and red across his shoulder, and one arm was crushed where it had gone under the tire. He tilted his ruined head toward the RV like he'd recognized it. "Hello," he rasped. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," I cursed. The first infected hit the side of the RV with a heavy thud, and the whole frame shook. Another slammed into the rear. Scout went mad, barking and snarling at the side window. I threw the door locks as if the bent metal and plywood in there needed any more false encouragement. The infected at the driver's side window dragged filthy fingers down the glass. David came straight for the front. He planted both hands on the hood and hauled himself up, face sliding into view over the bottom edge of the windshield. One cloudy eye, one ruined cheek, teeth black with blood. Then he started pounding on the glass. Scout lunged across the seat, barking in his face through the windshield. "Back!" I shouted, grabbing his collar and hauling him away. Another impact rocked the RV from the rear, then another. The side door gave a metallic groan. I looked at the dead fence, the dead tower, the dead cabin. No lights, no movement, nothing. I was about 3 seconds away from throwing the RV into reverse and taking my chances back down the mountain when the side door suddenly burst inward half an inch. A rotting hand came through the gap and gray fingers clawed at the ratchet strap. Scout barked so hard he choked. I jerked the revolver up and sung toward the door. Just another infected slammed into it from outside, and the plywood cracked with a dry, splintering sound. For one frozen heartbeat, all I could see was teeth, fingers, and the narrow space between me and getting dragged out into the dark. Then the night exploded into white light. Floodlights snapped on all around the perimeter at once, blinding after the dark. Scout yelped. David reeled back on the hood, one hand rising to shield his face, even though there was nothing human left in the gesture. A voice thundered from above. "Down!" Before I could move, gunfire ripped across the clearing. Not at me, over me. Shots cracked from the fire tower in a fast, controlled burst. Sparks flew from the hood. Its bullets punched through David's upper body and threw him backward off the windshield. The infected at the side door jerked and collapsed away from the gap. 2 more dropped near the rear of the RV. Another turned in a wet spray and spun sideways into the mud. Scout flattened himself against the seat, trembling. I ducked instinctively, one arm over my head, even as I realized the bullets were passing high and clean. More gunfire. Short bursts. Disciplined. Whoever was up there knew exactly what they were doing. In less than 10 seconds, the clearing went from chaos to silence. Not complete silence, the engine still idled and Scout panted hard. Somewhere outside, one of the infected made a weak bubbling sound before it stopped. But the pounding was over. The side door sagged in its frame. The windshield was streaked with crimson. And David was lying motionless in the mud in front of the RV. His red windbreaker lit up like a flare under the floodlights. I stayed exactly where I was. Then a harsh metallic clank echoed through the clearing. The gate in the fence shuddered and began to slide open. Scout growled again, quieter this time. A figure stepped through the opening and walked toward the RV, rifle in hand, face still hidden in the glare behind them. They stopped a few yards from the hood. For a second, all I could make out was a dark silhouette and the shape of a weapon. Then the figure lifted a hand. "You picked one hell of a night to arrive," a husky female voice called out. I gripped the revolver a little tighter but didn't raise it. Scout stood with his paws on the dashboard, ears forward, every muscle taut. The figure took a step closer, still half in shadow. "Engine off," she ordered. "Then we'll see if you and your dog are worth letting inside." And that's where we'll leave Ray and Scout for now. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. It genuinely helps me keep writing these stories. And if you'd like to hear what happens next, let me know in the comments. But for now, thanks for listening. Until next time, dear listener,